So let me just welcome those who have joined us sometime through the meditation, and also just welcome you again, Prajna. Thank you for the beautiful meditation instruction.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks for inviting me to your program.
Yeah, well, I don't know it's a program yet, I just keep going with what's calling to be done, and somehow people seem to start seeing it as a program. I hadn't quite gotten to that yet, but
okay.
So anyway, the topic today is living awake amidst family life, because Prajna's Prajna's own life, the unfolding of her awakening has taken her there. And so she has a lot of experience and a lot of insights to share with us about that topic. So Prajna, maybe we could just start by you telling us how that whole family experience started. It started in a very expanded state of mind that persisted, as I understand it, for a long time. And then things became very challenging with the birth of your twins. So maybe you could just give a kind of very brief summary so that people who don't know you have a sense of where it is that you're coming from.
Sure. Well, I think I have really run the full gamut of spiritual practices, you could say. And I think what's wonderful, let me just start out by saying, I think it's very wonderful that we can look into our family, whether it be our biological family or our current family system, as an opportunity for awakening itself, for deepening our awakening, for integration, and for really becoming stable in the vitality of who we are. Because it's not until we have this stability where we're really anchored in the richness of who we are that regardless of what comes to us in our life, whether it be a difficult family, illness, loss of job, whatever it is, we're going to be able to recognize the divinity in that situation. And I think that that's really the crux of the matter. Is I started out in as a very strong seeker. I would even call myself a spiritual addict, seeking spiritual experience. And I spent a lot of time in theology school and then in an ashram. And the ashram was packed full every day with rigorous exercises, rigorous spiritual disciplines. And I think it's very easy when you come into a spiritual environment, so-called, where there are a lot of practices, that we can limit our idea of what spirituality is, what awakening is, what it looks like, and really kind of get boxed in to a limited perspective where it can become philosophical or a concept, and we're not really having the direct experience. We're not maybe even doing the inquiry yet to see who we are. So what happened to me, I was so lucky that early on I had a very wise teacher, Eunice, who saw how I was involved in the ashram and also had a sense that she knew who she was. She had a sense that that was our purpose in life and that was my purpose. So she told me to get on with it. And when I left immediately, because 3 days later she died, so I took her message quite seriously. And then I went out to California, and so I went, the pendulum swung from the one end of deprivation, depriving myself of all of these things because I was living an austere life as a yogini. Then I went to the other end, and I couldn't stop eating in my friend's pantry. And it's kind of a funny story, but it was really that experience that brought me to my knees, that brought me, emptied me out enough of these practices where I saw without that I did not know who I was. So something in me opened up to find out truly who am I. And that is when the inquiry, who am I, truly took hold. And I could have gone anywhere, but I happened to go to a satsang, and I heard Ramana Maharshi's teaching. I could have heard non-dual teaching from anybody, and it would have landed because I was in a mode of receptivity. I had lost myself so much that I needed to find myself. In the finding of that, I fell into a very deep absorption with spirit, which came very naturally. I didn't ask for it or look for it. I didn't even understand it until many years later. So it was kind of a period of grace, a period of being able to come in and out of this samadhi, and within it there wasn't any thought, there wasn't any disturbance or distraction, so it was definitely a state of feeling unity. And then I was able to come out of it and be function at a very high level. And then my first child was born while I was falling in and out of these states by grace. And he came at home in a home birth, and it was very easy. It was simple. I put pumpkin pies in the oven, and then 2 hours later I took them out. She was born. It was like as easy as eating pumpkin pie. and then it was a very easy life with her because while I was pregnant with her, I was reading the Ribu Gita every day because I was working on the publication of that for the community that I was part of. And the Ribu Gita is a dialogue on the nature of reality. It's a very high dialogue on ultimate reality. And anybody can read that and listen to it, and after a while, something's going to happen. You're going to really get absorbed into what it's pointing at. So that was my experience. And then my twins came when my first baby was not even quite 2. And they came, it was an emergency C-section after a helicopter ride to a very prestigious hospital. And it kind of put the brakes on everything. Suddenly my world, it was the end of my spiritual world, let's say. It was the end of the limitation of spiritual experience, where it was as if spirit was saying, okay, so where's the truth in this experience? And it's interesting because I left the organization when my first child was 6 months old. We left, and it was time to move on. But when I left, a prayer rose up in me because I really thought that was my dharma. I thought that being part of that group and spreading Ramana Maharshi's teaching was my life. So when we left, I said, okay, if this isn't the full picture, show me what it is. It was kind of like a prayer that I didn't pray by myself, but it rose up in me. And it was a prayer to be shown the full extent of the truth. And part of me really believes fully that my twins came so that I could see how truth also lives in this expression. In this expression of something that nobody would necessarily ask for or want, this kind of hardship. But at the same time, is it really a hardship? Or is there just a perception of that? So that's where we can begin to really have a rich conversation, because every one of us has some kind of challenge come up at one time or another. And most often, it's the mind telling us that it's a problem. It's not necessarily a problem.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't have a full gamut of human expression and feeling as a result of what you're needing to face, what you're really coming up close to.
Mm-hmm.
Needing to become very intimate with something that you never thought you would ever have to face.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems, if I can just maybe generalize that, it seems like, in the spiritual journey, we may reach levels of insight or even, have experiences of full awakening, full shifting of reality. And then often after those experiences, which, tend to be quite blissful and expansive and everything, it's almost like it's part of the part of the unfolding of that experience that we then somehow get to experience some difficulty
Mm-hmm.
that that puts us face to face with this question: how is it possible to live that and not get, you know back in the more contracted state that was there before? And is it possible to include that also in that expanded state, in that expanded experience of reality?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the question, and I think that's more and more what people are wanting and looking for. How do I really live this
Mm-hmm.
this expanded space? So those are the questions. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's very possible. I know it.
Yeah. So Prajna, why don't you tell us a bit more about that, that experience, maybe both about how, I remember from the Buddha at the gas pump interview that you did with Rick Archer. I mean, you reached quite desperate states at points,
Mm-hmm.
I remember at one point you were actually ready to kill yourself and one of your daughters.
Yeah.
And somehow, you know, grace took over and saved both of you. So, I mean, clearly this was a very human experience and continues to be a very human experience also.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Well, let me start with the experience of birth itself, because there's somebody that asked a question about that. And I think what happens, just like when a child is born, when
Mm,
all of us come into this human form, there's a forgetting. There's a forgetting that happens.
yes.
And it's like the nature of who we are, the remembering of that, the direct knowledge of that, you could say, it rests dormant. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just lying dormant.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could say any mother who has had a child, they what happens in childbirth is that you have in your full pregnancy, or even if it's premature, there's a unity.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of two as one,
Yeah.
clearly in a very real way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
the
that's beautiful.
the mother knows that. So for the mother, it is an opportunity
Mm.
to, as you're going through birth, what needs to happen is that in order for the birth to happen, there has to be a relaxation. There
Mm.
has to be a a relaxed efforting, you could say. So
Mm.
so you're awake, you're attending, there's some attending, but there's a full relaxation.
Mm.
A full expansion needs to happen for the baby to be birthed.
Yes.
And so this is the same, this is an example of what repeats itself over and over and over again in life. Because we're given, just part of the human experience is to be birthing and dying. It's birthing and dying constantly. Every time a new experience arises within us, it's coming and then it's going. It's coming and it's going. So now so in our human nature, we're taught to hold on. We're taught to contract and to keep this because we have forgotten that what we are already is enough. That in the background there's already a fullness. So that's how contraction starts to happen around any kind of experience. So when you're in stress or you're in trauma, you're in big challenge, it's the tendency of the body for the biology to kick in. And depending on how we're organized, our biology is going to kick in different ways. And in that coming to the forefront, this forgetting can even recede more. It becomes more dormant because we're really in the front space and we can become exhausted, fatigued, stretched out and spread in all directions. And the biology needs to have sleep. It absolutely, our biology and our breathing, in order to continue, we need a rhythm. There has to be a rhythm, and when we're in rhythm, we're functioning at a pretty good level usually. So what happened to me is I fell out of rhythm. I was stretched in all directions. First, I needed to live in and out of the neonatal intensive care unit, which is a little bit like being in a battlefield because there's so much noise, bright light constantly, and I have a very sensitive system. And so it wore on me. It wore on me and it wore on me. Although in the beginning my biology and my hormones had kicked in and were very strong to preserve my babies, to take care of the biology. It was very, very strong. It was, full on. And I couldn't go to sleep if I were needed. If my body was needed for nursing or whatever else it was on. It wasn't able to sleep. And it was needed constantly. I was nursing 3 babies at the same time, and I was also pumping milk because I couldn't always be at the hospital. So after close to 3 years, it was about 2.5 years, I hit an edge. I came to a remarkable edge of darkness where, I was really shrouded in it, and I couldn't see past it. And I thought, if this is my life, I can't live it. It was like somewhere a very powerful voice said, no, I can't do this. And it took me to an edge. And then at the same time, as that wasn't allowed to happen, something pushed me back and said, go home, you're staying. And it was spirit. And it was a powerful spiritual experience because I fell asleep, so I don't really remember all of the specifics of I just got home and crashed, basically. But after I woke up, there was an abidance, there was a peace, there was an emergence of peace that came from, Libby. She stopped crying. It was just an atmosphere of peace. But what happened is I began to resist. I began to not resist the life I was given. So it was really, for me, it was about resistance. I had been in a space of resistance, so I wasn't able to see the whole picture. And so what it did, it narrowed my focus. And I thought, well, this is just it. I'm just going to be doing this forever. And I couldn't see past it. And when the resistance was lifted, I could take it moment by moment, day by day. Not that it suddenly became easy. It did not. But but it anchored me in the sense that something else is running the show. You know,
Mm.
that there's a greater intelligence operating here, a
Yeah.
much greater intelligence. And I started to trust that.
Mm-hmm.
I started to trust that and rely a little bit less on just my biology, thinking that I'm just limited to this biology and there's no way the biology can do this,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I think that even, you know, my picture might have been a little bit extreme, but it's all relative to anybody's, the environment they're in, the time of their life. It could be anything that comes up for somebody. You know, since that interview, I've received so many questions and comments of people coming from all sorts of situations where they were so grateful that I was able to freely speak about my experience of that dark night. Because who
Yes.
doesn't have a dark night? You know, I mean,
Yes.
I don't know anyone who doesn't have a dark night, including some of our greatest leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's how they become. The greatness comes out of the darkness.
Yes. And my sense is that actually that's how the expansion integrates humanly, because at a human level, of course, there is a tendency to resist what is difficult, what is a hardship at some level,
Mm-hmm.
or what goes against our notions, whatever they are. And so, that it's like what your experience brings out very clearly is, how the resistance, how far that can take us. It can really take us to the point of no longer wanting to be here in
Yeah.
this human life and having to deal with whatever situation, challenge, experiences we're having to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, my understanding is that that's when we're born into human life, that's one of the tendencies of that collective consciousness that we're born into, and one of the tendencies that are even hardwired.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's difficult, that's suffering, that's painful, we just want to avoid it. We resist it. That's the kind of almost like the default version.
Yeah.
And the default human setup, the setup of the animal, the human
Mm-hmm.
animal. And
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual experience is, or the spiritual dimension that comes into it, the divinity is, it's all included. It can all be part. It's that nothing's excluded. Nothing will take us to the point where we forget that this is it too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
so we're kind of, that's the tension within which our life plays out, our human life. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's beautiful in your experience is that you took that really to an extreme. I mean, there was an extreme, like, peacefulness and abidance, and then there was an extreme resistance. And out
Mm-hmm.
of that came a new level of just peace and acceptance.
Yeah.
But it's like the movement itself, it's like an eternal movement, all almost like within the human experience. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
expansion, challenge, resistance, more expansion.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. As soon as we start to say that this couldn't be it, and whatever our experience is, as soon as we say that, then we miss. we miss the lesson, we miss the divinity in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. That's where grace will come along and stop us. You know, and if it doesn't, somehow we get stopped. Because I really love what you said. I think the nature of reality, the nature of who we are, is to be in harmony. You know, that's our natural inclination, is to be at rest, to be at ease, to, like everything in us wants to come into resolution. It wants to be resolved. You know, and sometimes that's what we get taken to an extreme in order for resolution to happen. You know, we get pulled all the way out, so then we can go all the way back and see, oh, this too is included in the greatest intelligence of our divinity. All of it's included. Yeah. Yeah, so if we don't see ourselves as that, that's the thing. If we're subtracting ourselves out, then the chances of us, you know, really seeing reality are small, are reduced significantly.
Yes.
We're seeing our idea of it. We're not really seeing reality. We're seeing whatever the idea is we're superimposing at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're seeing what is according our ideas, you know, we're bound to be faced at some point with what doesn't fit, and what makes us feel very uncomfortable, or what can be very painful, very despairing even, and so that's a beautiful opportunity to, you know, to just surrender and just say, well, here it is. Here it is. Can that be it too? You know, can that be it too?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and just the fact that we're practicing and living among families, and we're living among postmodern culture. You know, we're not doing spiritual practice. I mean, some people are, but a small percentage of the population is going to live in a monastery or in a convent or mountain peak. You know, so I really in isolation, and it seems to me that it's really not. It's what pulls us out of isolation is what sets us free. So we can be isolated, you know, a sense of isolation no matter where we are, and including in the midst of a very busy family. You know, I mean, many families live, you know, in conflict or, you know, with locks on their doors and go to their own separate spaces in the house, kind of like their own little cave. And there's a sense of isolation or division because maybe they think, well, if only I could be at the monastery, this wouldn't be happening. But, you know, you go to the monastery or you go to India in the mountain, but you bring everybody with you. You know, they're not left at home. So home really is the perfect environment for practicing, because anything that triggers us in any way is an opportunity for us to see the divinity in it. You know, it's like, oh. So right there, it touches something, and then we can turn back and say, oh, what is this that's being touched? And then we touch it within ourselves, and then guess what? It gets touched also in the other person. And then we start to, you know, dismantle.
Could you give, just to be very concrete, could you give an example?
Yes. Well, say, I'll give an example of, you know, because I have to talk from my experience. But I remember my daughter, you know, as a teenager, my oldest daughter, because we had so many caregivers in and out of our house because we depended on people as helpers. And the turnover of caregivers was very, very difficult for her. You know, if you had just become comfortable with somebody in your home environment, and then they would move on for whatever reason. So what she did is she made a big sign for her door, her bedroom door, and when new people would come, she had the sign very clear, "Do not enter."
Mm-hmm.
And she would, and if she had to come out of her room and see these people, she'd run away and say, I don't want to see you."
Mm-hmm.
So part of that was, it wasn't personal. It wasn't about the people. Like our lives aren't personal, really. But she had so much leaving, emotional leaving in her life that she started to, at her heart, close off. She wanted to protect herself.
Yes.
So that's an example of somebody closes their door because they're wanting to protect something,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be your bedroom door or just, putting on a heavy coat, and the hiding, what we hide behind.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's a good strategy there. So there's a reason for it. And
Mm-hmm.
so people, as they're growing up in different families, different lifestyles, things happen so that the heart there's some wounding, because we're all sensitive human beings. And so then we want to close off and protect. And so then that person just needs, so we have to think about that person as being part of ourselves. So if that were me behind that door, how would I approach?
Mm-hmm.
How would I enter her space?
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people aren't going to think like that. They're going to be, well, what a bratty little kid, doesn't want to meet any of us, or, whatever, right? It's like whatever your consciousness is.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's happening in families all the time, regardless of what age the person is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's an example. And then, but the person who's going to be able to get through that door is the one who recognizes their own divinity and recognizes that child in themselves. That right out there is the same as me. And then in that recognition, we're going to be informed. We'll be informed about how to proceed. Like, you can't know before that moment.
Yes.
But whenever we come up against hiding or somebody closing off or being defensive, when we need to first step back into ourselves, into our own true nature. And when we do that, we can have compassion and we can see ourselves in that situation. And then we can move forward. We'll be informed on what to do.
Wouldn't, Prajna, I have a question to you about this. Wouldn't the first thing to meet in that situation be our own reaction, emotional reaction that may be there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
To
Yes.
this situation.
Yes.
So, the reaction may be, well, who the hell does she think she is? Bratty teenager kind of thing, So wouldn't that be the first place to meet inside?
Yes, yes. Just in this moment, it isn't there for me, so I didn't think about it. But yes, of course, because you can't see reality until you experience whatever it is you're experiencing. Exactly. Yeah. So like, you don't want to try to override or do a spiritual bypass about your humanity and however you're being stimulated. That definitely, you might have to take a step back and go, have your own experience, of course. Yes. Thank you for not leaving that out. Most definitely. Because otherwise, what would we be doing? We would be suppressing a part of ourselves.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I'm just thinking of, maybe I'll just introduce the other angle of family life, which is our relationships with our parents. And I'm just thinking of, my own history with my parents, which was that I actually, I was carrying a lot of pain from my own childhood. A lot of it actually related to my sister, my older sister, and some of it related to my parents. And so as I was in the process of therapy and going through, whatever, experiencing whatever needed to come up, I actually cut off from my parents for 5 years, which is a long time, you know. I mean, these days I think, my God, how could I do that to them? But at the time it felt absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know that they had their own responses to that.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my mother told me that at some point she had a conversation with somebody in a retreat setting, you know, a Christian retreat setting that she used to go to. And she had this conversation with somebody much younger, more like my age, and he said to her, "You must be really angry." And she realized she was, you know, she had been more aware of the painfulness of it, but not of her anger. And somehow that shifted something in her that made her make the step of recontacting me.
Uh-huh.
Hadn't
Mm-hmm.
done all that time. And of course, as you know, the as things happen, as life happened, I was ready also to reconnect with her at that point, but not quite ready to make that step back into reconnection. So she made that for both of us. But it was very clear that for her, it was the facing of the anger that allowed her to reconnect.
Yeah.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I was very struck by that at the time. And of course, you know, it was also whatever it was that I was facing throughout those years that allowed me to reconnect at a level where I was willing to actually just be open enough again to start reconnecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think that's so true. You know, that, and then in our adult life, if we don't get to resolve, we carry these suppressed energies, and
Mm-hmm.
they show up in so many different ways in our current relationships or in our health or
Mm-hmm.
in, you know, whatever it is we're trying to accomplish, and then something gets in the way of that. So it's a really beautiful thing that you're saying, and this is why I still adore sitting meditation, just sitting,
Mm-hmm.
letting a sitting practice be this opportunity to let those energies unpack, to let
Mm-hmm.
them, to let them unwind. You know,
Mm-hmm.
where you can do that in a lot of different ways, but you know, for me, I really love the stillness practice for that, the unwinding.
Yeah.
And it can also happen just in a conversation like this, where you and I are speaking. You know, just being listened, just just the mode of receptivity to listen. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
bet when you and your mother met that there probably was a listening that was able to happen that hadn't been able to happen for many years. And
Mm-hmm.
the healing happens in that listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you know, to be honest, it was part of my listening to myself that I realized that my mother's listening was somewhat limited.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
it was not likely to change, and to find peace with that, you know, to just realize that some beings are limited in what they're capable of, human
Hmm.
beings. And of course, there's always a possibility of there being an unfolding and an undoing of that limitation. But at the same time, it may not happen. And, you know, in terms of our relationship with our parents and our children, you know, that's part of the, I don't know, the growing edge, you know, the edge of peace,
Hmm.
to realize that there may always be this limitation, and
Yeah.
that, you know, that is part of that relationship.
Yeah. Yes, that we're gonna be unique. and
Yeah.
not everybody is going to be able to be the same thing for the next person.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that it seems, in some cases it seems this way, and in other cases it doesn't, that humanity and the children that are coming now, there's an evolution. It's
Mm,
like there seems to be a different kind of capacity. Not
mm,
not everywhere, but in many places I see this. For instance, my oldest daughter and even my twins who have some physical limitations, they
mhm,
have a wider capacity for listening. You know,
mhm,
my oldest daughter is an incredible listener. She's a
mhm.
counselor at a camp right now, and I think, God, those teenagers are so lucky to have her, or the young kids, because she can have fun and listen, and
Mhm,
they learn at this camp. It's quite remarkable that they teach these young people nonviolent communication and the five path of the Buddha and things like this.
mhm,
I mean,
mhm.
when we were growing up, we weren't given these kinds of courses, and in most high schools, you don't get them either. But young people are getting these things now
Mhm.
in college, wherever. It's quite fascinating. It's wonderful. So that gives them a new tool. It gives them a new resource that, of
Mm,
course, our
mm.
parents didn't have. I didn't
Yes.
know, or maybe we didn't even have at that young of an age.
No, no, for sure.
So it's a different resource.
Mhm.
And I mean, look at the resource that we have right now. With the internet.
Mm.
It has its limitation, of course, also, but it's a wonderful resource.
Yes, it is. It is. So Prajna, just can I switch back a little bit to your experience?
Sure.
Would you so you pointed to the need for meditation, or the meditation being the space where things could kind of unwind, and where you could come back to truth for yourself. So I imagine, I mean, with two disabled teenage children and one other child, and being a single mother, you really didn't have a lot of time to
No.
meditate. So how did you cope with that? I mean, where did you find those spaces?
Mhm. Yeah. Very good question. I think first how it came to me is, well, I met Adi Shanti.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met Adi Shanti, I really was gifted by this new ability to let everything be as it is. Not always, but that was certainly growing in me. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, this this energy, the energy to jump into another life, to jump out of my life and into another life, or the grass is greener on the other side, or all
Mm-hmm.
of, all of those energies that think, well, if I just have this, or if I just do this, it will be better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were slowing down. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't they didn't stop altogether, but they were slowing down. And as
Mm-hmm.
the energy slowed down, I could be at the park, with my daughters in the
Mm-hmm.
same, while I could still carry the little ones. We could be anywhere, and
Mm-hmm.
it would be the same as sitting in meditation. It would be the same because the
Right.
appreciation was there for life as it is. So
Mm-hmm.
I could be at home cooking a meal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
until now, reading bedtime stories. Oh, I loved reading bedtime stories. It was, to me, no
Mm-hmm.
different than reading a spiritual book,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really about your presence. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
fully present to
Mm-hmm.
whatever you're doing, the nitty-gritty details, then it's satisfying. And the day seems to kind of flow by. But on a day where thinking, oh, well, I know there's this event going on somewhere and I can't go to it because I'm stuck at home, then that story starts spinning, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
A degree of heaviness and disconnect,
Yeah.
and wishing for it to be different.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as that is lifted,
Mm.
then there's no place like home, right? No
Yes.
place like home, no place like home.
And
Then it can
yeah.
be, yeah,
And
but also,
the beauty of being with children also is that they're naturally in that being space. You
yes,
know, so it's actually it's like their gift to us that they help us be there ourselves.
yeah,
Way that adults usually don't unless they're really able to be in that presence, in that beingness themselves.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, as we get more into our doing and our agendas, we want to be on a time schedule.
Mm-hmm.
We're taught that this and this has to happen at a certain time, and
Yes.
that may or may not work for a particular family.
Mm.
Because I mean, all the way from the earliest days up into the school years, where you really get regimented by a schedule, by an external schedule
Yes.
called called the school schedule,
Mm-hmm.
which may not work for a particular family life at all.
Yeah.
And then someone tries to follow that, and all sorts of problems can ensue from that, depending on how any particular body is wired. Like they may, or getting up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning to catch a bus might not work for. That's not how
Mm-hmm.
they're wired. So they're kind of being forced
Mm-hmm.
to move out of a more natural state,
Mm-hmm.
to contrive a way of being,
Mm-hmm.
contrived way of being. And for many children these days, they end up with learning challenges,
Yeah.
or what they call ADD and other kinds of things. And really, all that I think that is that that particular program isn't working for that child. So they're not fitting into that box. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if you peel it back, there's nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you peel back whatever label they've been given, if you start to remove the conceptualizations about how somebody is supposed to be, you'll see you'll just see the richness of who they are, and there isn't anything wrong. And then
Mm.
you can let somebody blossom from there. That takes a really brave and courageous parent. And many do these days, especially where we live. They start to homeschool their children or
Mm-hmm.
send them to charter schools, and they do different things because they see that that particular external program to be on this kind of a time frame
Mm-hmm.
isn't, it's not
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think
it
that
certainly didn't work for me at the time when I had to go to school.
oh yeah,
I could have been labeled ADD for the first 2 years because I was totally bored out of my mind, and I just got up to no good because I was so bored. And I kind of learned to adjust, but it wasn't a good experience for me.
yeah. Well, and you said boredom. I mean, like that's it. When a person isn't able to be who they are, they can
Mhm.
tend to have a sense of being bored.
Yeah.
And then what happens in boredom? We try to distract ourselves. Then we find all these different ways to be distracted, and we
Hmm.
move a little bit further away from our true nature. you
Yeah.
know so I mean, our world, our economy, so many systems are built upon distraction
Mm.
to stay busy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but children, yeah, from where you started out, children can be an incredible gift because they're closer to this sense of remembering.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And the mother too, to have a child, she comes close to that because in order to have the child, she has to give up total control for the baby
Mm.
to be born. It's just like in dying. It's a total letting go. There, it seems as though there isn't a choice. Well, at
Yeah.
birthing, there isn't a choice either. It has to
Mm.
happen. So it's a wondrous, because somebody asked me that question, like, do you think that childbirth is an opportunity for awakening? Well,
Mhm.
yes, just because of that. Because
Mhm.
that's what it is. It's being able to fully relax and to let go of control completely. And
Mhm.
in that, everything is pulled, the veils are pulled back, and then true nature is shining.
Mhm.
A
Mhm.
wonderful opportunity. And then you get to hang out in that element with this newborn. You get to be in that spaciousness of just being.
Mhm. Mhm.
They haven't come into functioning yet. And they adjust our time schedule. In order
Mhm.
for it to be a harmonious relationship, we need to adjust. The mother has to adjust. And so
Yes.
coming off of another schedule. So
Mhm.
that's the interesting thing of being, for me, just to kind of, I'm not going off too much, I don't think, but I did tell this story in the Bat Gap interview that when I was teaching at a certain point in Pennsylvania, I was really very busy, and I was
Mhm.
going back between being mom and being teacher and having clients. Well,
Mhm.
what I came to discover is that they're very different worlds. Because
Mhm.
when you're in the home environment as a mom with young children, you're functioning in a really different way. And
Yes.
even your languaging changes. How you communicate changes.
Mhm.
So then you go out and you go to kind of present yourself, not so much as a professional, but, as somebody who has some realization and can communicate and
Mhm.
be present. It's a very different field. So I
Mhm.
started noticing that and seeing this is a very, it gave me a really great appreciation for stay-at-home moms, because
Mhm.
really, you really just need to stay at home for quite a while. It doesn't work for all of us to go out and be with adults
Mhm.
when energetically we're being programmed to be with children.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're meant to be in that field.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Just an interesting side point, for anybody who thinks they should run out the door and start working right away. Well, you can, but you miss a great opportunity.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'm wondering, Prajna, I mean, for sure there's an opportunity to surrender to a rhythm that's really not your own as a mother, the rhythm of the child or the children. Um, and at the same time, it seems to me that just as with everything else, and maybe I'm too generalizing here, but let me just say this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I mean, mothers can be incredibly controlling. They can think they need to control everything, and um, they don't get it that actually things will be much easier if they surrender their control, and they kind of they adjust to the timing that's not their own.
Yeah,
And to some extent, that's also enforced by society, by the need to get children to school, and get them to their social activities and God knows what. So, mothers can be incredibly controlling, and they can also see that as an opportunity to surrender, to let go.
of course.
But
Yes.
then that's the opportunity in everything we do, everything we experience, isn't it? I mean, is there something specific about mothering
Well,
that you
I think
see that really helps that surrender?
well, I think what it is with mothering, which is different from, saying, going out in society to a professional job or career, is that in mothering there really isn't an escape. There isn't an escape door. You're,
Mm-hmm.
you you're it. There isn't somebody else that, if you can't really call in sick.
Mm-hmm.
you're really it. So your chances of surrender are greater just because of that.
Right.
Because otherwise there's suffering. Otherwise you suffer greatly. But because like you really have to be there, you have to also be able to develop your tools, your resources. You have to, for me, Adi Shanti in the beginning was a great resource, and satsang was a resource, because I didn't really have the sacred, a carved out space for myself in my home. It was taken over by everything.
Yes.
So, but eventually I did step out of the house for a certain amount of time, either for a walk or to go to satsang. And then I developed the resource of my own practice. Like, what was it for me, and what is it for every person, so that you can be with the situation more fully. Like, where do you take your sacred space? Even though, children are closer to the sense of divinity, they also can be little rascals, right? They fill up their diapers, they spit up, they mess up the house, they do everything. They're lovely little angels, but they're also little rascals that keep you very busy.
Yeah.
So everybody needs a break from that. And if you're on a 9-to-5 kind of job, you know when your break is. But when you're a parent, you have to build it in. You have to really either wake up early, or you really have to be creative, hire somebody to help you, all these different things, because I think that they're the parents who start to sound a little bitchy, a little controlling, a little because they haven't really resourced themselves yet.
Right.
They haven't found a way to do that with anything, as you said. I mean, that comes up with anything.
Yes, totally. So Prajna, we're coming up to the hour, and I'm wondering whether this would be a good point to look at questions that people may have for you.
Yes.
Now, so if you're here and if you're watching and you have a question, please type it into the comment space to the what is it? It appears to the right of the image and the actual video, and you can, I will pass the question or the comment on to Prajna. So please feel free to do that now. Right now, I don't see anything yet.
Is it the box that's called chat?
Yes, I think so. Comment or chat.
Okay,
yeah.
on my screen it's to the left and it's called chat.
Oh, really? It's to the left?
Well, when you click on it, it goes to the right.
Okay, well, there you go.
Did you get the questions that I sent you?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
If you have a question that maybe you want to answer that was sent to you, maybe you could go ahead with one like this.
Sure.
As we're waiting, because there's a slight delay between, the actual reality of our conversation and the live broadcast. So it sometimes takes just a little bit of time before the comments start showing up.
Okay.
So if you have a question that was sent to you that you'd like to answer, go right ahead.
Yeah. There were I don't have them in front of me, so I'm going to go by memory.
Okay.
But one was, in awakened living, is there a particular diet to follow? Because, and especially in family life, and how do you do that when everybody is on a different diet?
Yes.
There's different food preferences. So that's a very good one. And first of all, I wanted to say, as far as awakening goes, everybody has to follow their own biology. You have to figure out for yourself what is the diet that works for you. Everybody has different sensitivities, but there isn't a requirement as far as diet goes. And then in the household, I think it's going to be, as soon as we don't have a concept about the need for a particular kind of diet, then we're not going to be as determined to want to change somebody else's diet.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, like for me, I know in myself that many things do well by example, and by having the appropriate food choices available. Having everything there with a light attention to it, without making it a strong command.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as we do that, so they're gonna resist. They're gonna push back against it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
if you push it too hard, they're gonna push back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just seeing what happens if once we relax the idea that eating has to be a particular way, or somebody has to follow my same diet. Just in that, noticing what happens, I think can be really wonderful. What do you think, Grace? That's a good one for you too, huh?
I don't know. I mean, my question to you would be, what happens if you have, 3 kids and they all have different preferences, and then there's yourself? I mean, you reach certain practical limits.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and it's really a personal thing, because whatever you choose to do, you need to be able to stand behind it. I think there has to be consistency and rhythm, and it has to be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, when I put food out on the table, that's what the meal is. And I know what the sensitivities and allergies are, and I'm not going to present those. And if sometimes if well, actually all the time, if they don't eat, then they go hungry. That's one way, because then there's another meal coming up, and you have to really be able to be strong on that. And they have to wait until the next meal. I mean, there's so many different ways to do that, because that all has to do with discipline and parenting style. And I will not claim to be an authority on parenting style. I will not, because I think it's the most complicated job that anybody can come up against. And, you have to know what your resources are and what you can stand behind. And I think that's what children notice. Children are really smart. And if you're saying one thing and you're doing something else, they're going to notice it, and they're not going to do what you say, because if you have to stand behind it. So I think that's it, and having lots of choices available, of course, within whatever your means are. But I think, and two, for me, one of my downfalls is that I tend to create a few meals and like them, and I repeat them a lot. But now my kids are old enough, 2 of them at least, to help with the cooking, or take turns cooking. And I can say, okay, well, we'll go shopping you'll come shopping with me, and we'll make a list, and we'll make sure that we're going to have some meals that you like to cook, right? So spreading out the responsibility once they get of age. Having the children involved in the cooking, in the planning, in the shopping, in the preparation, in the cleanup, having them involved from a very early age in all the different parts. Because then when they get to that age of not liking things, because it will happen, they'll already be a participant. And it's kind of not going to be that much of a choice even, because they're already in the game.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So, Prajna, I'm just looking again, and there's still no question.
Okay, I have another one.
You have another one? Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, this is cute. But there's one woman who asked. We talked some about surrender, and he wanted to know more about that. So I don't know if we could maybe talk about that a little bit more. And also, she wanted to know if she needed a teacher. Like, is it necessary to have a spiritual teacher?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. So as far as surrender goes, if you're listening now and you weren't able to be here for the guided meditation, I think that particular guided meditation is a true invitation to what it feels like energetically to surrender. So to get the feeling sense of the totality of who you are. And the more that we experience directly who we are, the more natural it is to release, to just be soft, to kind of loosen the grip. And that we can, because we're falling into grace, right? We're falling more and more into the totality of who we are. And then this idea of surrender or letting go becomes a little bit of a moot point because you already are surrendered. You already are yourself. And then in this space of the mystery, it informs what is to do. It informs itself. And you start to listen and be receptive to a intelligence that lives all of us. So I think, for me, that's my advice on it, because it's what has worked for me. Not only did I got brought to the edge, which was a big surrender. I don't advise that if you can avoid it. So if you can, little increments, not to think of it as all at once. Like if that happens, wonderful. But each time that we relax and we recede into ourselves, we're surrendering. That's a surrender. That's a letting go of control. And then as far as having a teacher, well, as far as a guru, there's the difference between a teacher, a guide, a mentor, and a guru. I mean, I think essentially, if we're going to abdicate our authority to another person, there comes a point when that's not going to serve us. And the sooner and the more that we can rely on this inner intelligence, of course, the better. And if we can find a teacher who can continuously point us back to this and be a mirror, that's a wonderful teacher. That's a wonderful guide to have. And of course that's helpful. We all need guidance at one time or another. We need mentoring. We need somebody who's been there, somebody who's already traversed the mountain to tell us a little bit about the terrain. All of that is really wonderful. The thing that I did at one time, and it's not a problem when it happens because you learn from it, is to expect and to think that somebody else has all the answers and that I don't. That somehow I'm lacking of that wisdom and that I need to go to somebody else for it. And if somebody is bringing you in that way and kind of diminishing your own power, then it might be time to move on. Because if you're standing in somebody else's shadow, you're not going to see your own light. So yes, a teacher can be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
So you see what you resonate with. What you have to listen to yourself. Oh, because that was the other part of the question. How do I find the teacher that is for me? I think it's a resonance. You resonate in a way that is beyond words. I say with Adyashanti, when I first met Adyashanti, there was such a resonation. I just sat. We didn't have a conversation for some time, but what I knew was that he didn't need anything from me. He didn't need me to, kind of bow down to him or say, "Oh, you're the great teacher with all the answers." That was what I felt. I felt this like, wow, I'm going to be able to be myself. And there's a part of, we all know, and there's this intrinsic drawing back, there's this force in us that is pulling, like life is pulling us out, and at the same time our force, our true nature, is pulling us back into ourselves. So both are happening. And so a teacher that can support us to listen to that, to be in the world but not of the world, to move out and to come back. To live your life, to show up for life, but to be restored in your true nature, to be able to do both. That's a good teacher.
Yeah, yeah. That's it's a great answer. Thank you.
Mm.
And you know, I'm wondering, there was something you said about Adyashanti that kind of made me just flash with something that I think is also a true hallmark of a good teacher, which
Mm-hmm.
is that when you're in the presence of that teacher, you're actually able to experience yourself more fully
Mm-hmm.
and more truthfully, so that ultimately it's not at all about the teacher, but it's really about the presence of the teacher that allows you to become more present to yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Very well put. Yeah, the presence. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Yeah. And
yeah.
there was one last question that which I don't know when you want to end, but it might be a good one to end on, or this can. I don't know when you want to end, Grace.
Oh, go ahead. There's one comment, but I can read that out after. So
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead with the
this,
question.
this came from yeah, through a Facebook message. Let me see if I can get it just right. But there's somebody who feels like they abide. You know, they're in an abidance, and then
Mm-hmm.
the mind becomes active, and they're wondering, you know, how will they be able to continuously abide and not have the mind come in to play?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there was a reference to, is this samadhi? You know, when there's no activity of the mind. And so how I wanted to address that was that peace and the mystery of being isn't dependent on what's happening in the mind. You know, the mind can be quiet, or it can have different thoughts passing through, rising and falling, insights, all sorts of things can be happening in the mind. That's that's not that's not our focus. Our focus is the space, the mystery in which it's happening. And that is forever at ease. You know, so that's abiding in itself constantly. So if we're gifted with a moment of no thought, that's a wonderful thing. But when thought comes, it doesn't mean that we're no longer abiding.
Mm.
We need thought for our functionality. So if there isn't thought, wonderful, you can savor it. But then when thought comes, check to see, is it really a problem? You know, that's something that I could say all sorts of things, but you need to find out for yourself. Just when it happens, look and see, you know, is there a problem with thought right now? And see what happens. So just to remember that thought isn't the focus. The focus is in the space. That's the context. You know, that's the content. But the context is space, the
Mm.
behind space, the mystery, and what's aware of it. Yeah. So
Mm.
it's not a problem. I just wanted to say that because that's always a really big question about the activity of the mind.
Yes, yes. And that's I like that way of answering it. And you know, in addition, it may help to also ask yourself, for whom is it a problem? You
Uh,
know,
yeah.
because ultimately, you know, there's a thought that thoughts are a problem. You know, it's just
Yeah.
another thought.
Hmm.
Um, so when you see that clearly, you realize that they're really, you know, it's more a question of either focusing on the thought or being aware of that context in which it arises, from what it arises.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Uh huh.
Yeah. So, Prajna, can I read out the comment to you?
Hmm.
It's not a question. It's by Wendy. She says, "No questions, but I really appreciated this exchange and the clarity of the reflections on this essential part of life, i.e., living with children and being with them in a way that promotes their flowering.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes. Because as they flower, we flower.
Yes.
One
Yeah.
big it's one wonderful garden. Then, yeah, thinking of it like a garden is a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Prajna, how is this life for you now? I mean, you have a daughter who's, at the age of leaving home, and you have the two teenagers, one of whom I take it will need your presence for the rest of your life, or will need caring presence for the rest of your life, and maybe even both.
Mm-hmm.
So, so what's your perspective now?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad you're asking that because I have received comments from other people who have actually are in a position of taking care of their grown children as adults because
Mm-hmm.
of mental illness or something else.
Yeah, yeah.
And well, right now I just feel like I am always busy, of course. But
Mm.
I have learned, and it's taken, it seems like a very long time for me to learn how to keep things in balance. You know, where I go off and take a retreat or a break for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
practice yoga, and we have a garden going. But right now, it's a very wonderful time because I have 42 hours of nursing for my daughter Libby, and actually right now it's being fulfilled. So
Mm-hmm.
he's in school part of the day, and then I have two very wonderful nurses right now. Wonderful. I could ask for nothing better.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always happen like that, to have a caregiver come into your home and to have it really be a good match.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy because it's not just taking care of Libby. It's how do they flow with the whole family. You
Yes.
know? So and then also the turnover, getting adjusted to somebody and them leaving and then needing to readjust to somebody else. So right
Mm-hmm.
now we have very good chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very lucky about that. And I'm also looking right now for, at different times, Libby has been out of the house for a short time, maybe for 2 weeks. The longest she was ever out was for 3 months. And it
Mm-hmm.
didn't work for her. It doesn't work for her to be away from home. So I know that she does better at home. So part of my vision on my website is to create a holistic care home. So by the time they finish high school, which is 2 more years, I'm hoping that I'll have a beautiful care home in place in which she can live, and I will be involved with it, of course, but it won't be my full-time work. I
Mm-hmm.
I know that for me, I don't think I can do that into infinity. I need to be doing some other things. I've done it for a long time, and I try to balance it with this passion that I have for truth. And,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm looking for somebody to come and live with us. We've created a space now where we have space for a live-in person.
Mm-hmm.
And, you just have to weigh out your resources and finding the good match. But right now, having the nursing help is wonderful, and Abby's at school 5 days a week. She's the other twin, so
Mm-hmm.
that gives me the daytime to work. And I have to be very efficient with my time. Anybody who is kind of pressed in this way, and many people are, you need to be efficient with time. You need to I need to prioritize. I need to. Sometimes I notice that I spend too much time with social networking, and I have to pull back and take a break from that.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever else, I have to really be mindful of distractions, like what
Mm-hmm.
drains our energy and what gives us energy. All of those things, because when you're in a position where there's a high demand, you have to be extra sensitive to what is serving your energy and what's detracting from it.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I do, as you know, I have the Thursday sittings we have a new space that we've created, and now we've gone global with that. And that is the deepest nourishment for me. I just love it. So
Yeah.
as long as I can sit with people and have yoga, and we have we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up early and I'm up late, but my system has adapted to it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's a full day, and there's always more to do at the end of the day.
There's an old saying, isn't there? Mother's work is never done.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is, the more that you accept your life as it is. I mean, I appreciate so many things that I didn't appreciate before. I mean, I have hobbies that I didn't have before. I've developed some, art and sewing. We have crafts and things. I've done a lot of additional trainings so that I could work therapeutically with my children in a way that's beneficial to them, but also that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So I've found a way to bring richness to it as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beautiful. And I imagine that that's really what is very nurturing to you in that situation.
Yes.
So, in addition to the stillness, to the meditation.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I think that people are, well, this is something I just want to say publicly, because after the Buddha at the gas pump interview,
Mm-hmm.
I got some comments from people that could listen to that story in about my life and could think, wow, what a hard life, what a lot of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, even with my newsletter, sometimes I'll make reports about my children because it's something I'm excited about. And some people love it and really want to hear about my children and what they're doing in their progress. And other people don't want to hear it because they think that it's a hardship or a burden somehow.
Right.
And I want everybody to know that at one time it did feel like that when I was resisting it. But now that I've come fully into it, I can't imagine doing anything else. It's given me such a valuable life and such a wonderful opportunity to widen my capacity in so many things.
Mm.
I wake up every morning looking forward to seeing my children.
Mm.
And I also look forward to putting them to bed at night. Both.
Mm-hmm.
Time to rest. But there isn't any suffering in it. I think that was one of the questions too. It's like, how do you be in difficulty without suffering? And I think that the way that happens is that we continuously return to ourselves. And we have to check to see, what is the mind saying about the situation? Is it the mind's commentary, the mind's interpretation, the mind's projection? Because that's not real. The reality is the direct experience of who we are right now, reflecting in this child, this situation, in this person. And when we're in our divinity, we see their divinity, and we can't find a problem in it. There isn't any suffering because nothing is splitting off. There's only separation when there's a conclusion that this shouldn't be happening.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, and some people say, "Oh, your life is so hard. I really don't think I should contact you, but I was very inspired by your story." And I say, "Oh, my life isn't hard. Please contact me." It's okay. Okay, I can handle it.
Maybe I'll just add this. It's beautiful because maybe the thing that's been hardest in my life has been 2 episodes of cancer, and people think of that as very hard, and
That is what
I'd say what makes it hard is the resistance to aspects of that experience or to the experience as such. And I actually just gave a workshop for people who are going through the are in the midst of that cancer experience at the moment. And it was just such a beautiful experience because there was something that I had to give. There was something that I could be for them that I couldn't have been without that experience. And so, as we are in those experiences, very naturally we come to a place where we also want to share the lessons and the learnings and the gift of those experiences, the gifts of them. And what you're saying is exactly that. It's like when you're in the gifts of that experience, there really isn't a problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a sense of satisfaction.
Yes, and of fullness and of isness. This is just what is. This is what my life turned out to be. This is how it seems to be unfolding. So that's what it is.
It's what it is. Yeah. 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 And you can, and when it is what it is, there's really a true peace with that. It's very different than, the idea of acceptance.
Yeah.
Very, very different. Because sometimes those are some of the spiritual concepts of, well, if I just have the right thoughts and I think positively and I accept, that's an overlay. That's very different than being with the isness of it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So, Prajna, I'll just read out one more comment that's there by Siv. And she says, like Wendy, I'd also just like to say thank you much. Thank you so much. I am glad I watched. So she obviously appreciated.
Yeah, I know that one. You're welcome. She told me she has been trying to attend the global sittings and she's having a hard time. So I'm glad she was able to connect with this program.
Wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've come to a kind of natural end here. So I'd just like to thank you very much, Prajna, for speaking to us about family life, about your experience. I think it'll be very inspiring for people who go through a similar experience. It's always inspiring to hear the experience of others who are thriving in that experience and through that experience, who are not in the suffering of it. That can be just so deeply inspiring. And so my sense is that this conversation in particular will just be incredibly helpful for people. So thank you very much.
Well, good. Well, I hope so. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed getting to know you, Grace, through setting this up and watching some of the other videos. You're doing a wonderful job. It's a great service. And that people can freely, click on and tune in. So I'm very happy to have been able to share and look forward to more sharings.
Yes, yes. So people can, if people want to contact you, you find Prajna's website. If you go to the speakers tab on the Living from Love website, you'll find her website details, which are prajnalivingawake.com.
.org.
.org. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So, and obviously you can find out more about Prajna, and you also have a book forthcoming. So I think there's a few excerpts from the book. So if you feel, drawn to contacting Prajna, I'm sure you'd be happy for people to connect with you.
Yes, more and more people are connecting with me, but I love it. I love engaging, so please don't ever feel like it's too much because you know a little bit about my life. I'm very happy to hear from you.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you again, Prajna. And just to yeah, thank you. And just to wrap things up, you've been listening to a live online conversation, which is part of a series of conversations. This one with Prajna Ginty on family life, living awake amidst family life. And the series has the theme of living from love. And you find information about forthcoming conversations on the Living from Love website, which is living-from-love.com this time. Mm-hmm. And there's one more conversation in a week's time on June 8th with Neelam. And after that, I'll be visiting my family in Germany. So I'll be out of action for a while, and I'll also be on retreat. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And then I'll probably take a little break over the summer. And my sense is that things will start up again in August. If you'd like to know about future events, just go to the website and sign up to the newsletter, and you'll get all the information that you'll need. So yes, so thank you for watching. Thank you for being interested in this, and I'll see you again soon. And thank you again, Prajna.
Okay, thank you everybody for
tuning in. Very lovely.
Be well.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.